All right, moving on to former presidential candidate Pete Buttigieg. He's the author of the new book, Trust America's Best Chance, that examines the loss of trust in our institutions and the need to get it back. Trust. Mayor Pete, great to have you back on the show. I figure you wrote this book given the fact that a lot of trust has been lost. How do we get it back?
Yeah, I was reflecting on trust, first of all, as a candidate. When you're running for president, you realize how much of an exercise in trust it is. You're trusting your future to a team around you, but most importantly, you're asking Americans to trust you with their lives. And I wanted this book to come out before the election because I think the election in many ways is our country's ultimate exchange of trust. The American people, in something that was a radical innovation in the 18th century, are trusted to choose our leaders, and we're all deciding who we should trust with things like the awesome powers of the presidency. Of course, the problem right now is we've seen trust breaking down. I think there are three crises around trust in this country. Political trust, where we have trouble trusting our institutions. Social trust, Americans actually trust each other less than we used to. And there's a huge problem of what I would call international trust, which is countries around the world that used to trust the U.S. to help lead the world, wondering whether they can actually do that. So the book really explores all of that, and even just in the weeks since I sent in the manuscript for good, we're seeing more and more examples of that. I'm especially troubled by this week's news. I mean, think about the way it feels, wondering whether you can trust the president's doctor to be telling us the truth, right? I mean, he represents the White House, the military, and medicine, three of the institutions we should be most able to trust in moments of crisis. And yet Americans are wondering whether we can believe anything we're hearing about the president's condition, when the president was diagnosed, and it speaks to that bigger problem.
Mayor Buttigieg, it's Willie Geist. Good to see you. The White House, of course, has given the American people great reason not to trust what it hears. But you get into the book that this doesn't obviously begin with the Trump administration. If you go back to the late 50s and early 60s, there was great trust in the federal government, great trust in the institutions to do the right thing. And that has eroded over time through Watergate and through Vietnam, through the financial crisis and 9/11 and all the things that we've seen, the Iraq War since then. I want to zero in on the social trust piece of it, because that's deeply troubling. When David Brooks calls this the age of disappointment for so many people, just the way that we look at each other. You know, in this age of Trump, it's sort of, oh, that person's on that side, I'm on this side, I can't trust that person anymore. How do you begin to rebuild that trust that has eroded?
Well, that's exactly right. And just to get through life in more ways than we think, we depend on trust. Every simple transaction, every process we go through every day depends on the ability to trust other people around us. And we've got to do something about it. There are a lot of things we can do about it. This, for example, is one reason I'm a big fan of the idea of national service, not forcing people to serve. And certainly military service isn't for everybody. But when I think to my time in the military and how I wound up learning to trust my life to people I had just met, people who were sometimes radically different from me in terms of their politics or where they were from or their background. It's a reminder that when people are brought together with a difficult challenge and an urgent mission, they can form those bonds of trust. And in a way, the American people are confronted with an urgent challenge and an important mission nationwide in dealing with this pandemic. And I think this is going to happen again over a longer period of time in confronting the looming climate crisis. With the right leadership, an emergency like what we're facing now could actually be the occasion to build greater trust among Americans. But of course, so much depends on what our leaders have to say and whether they would divide us for their own gain or recognize an opportunity to knit back together that social fabric in our country that's been so torn apart. It's one of the reasons why it's so important to me that we elect Joe Biden this year.
One of the things you were able to do during your campaign, Mayor Buttigieg, it seems to me, is to criticize your opponents, to criticize Donald Trump on matters of policy and temperament without mocking his voters, as some people do. You come from a state of Indiana where there are many Trump voters. You served many of them as mayor of South Bend, Indiana. So on that question, the social, cultural question of neighbors distrusting each other, neighbors looking at each other differently because of politics, where do you go to start to build that piece back?
Well, I think we've got to create more opportunities to engage people we disagree with politically without regard to politics. In other words, build a relationship first, and then we can talk about some of the differences in how we view the world. And, you know, social media has done a lot to drive us apart, but it also holds the potential, if we're using technology in the same way that we would use kind of the toolkit of an in-person community, whether it's our neighborhood, our city, maybe a faith community that we're part of, whatever we can do to build those kind of overlapping patterns of belonging. That's what we're going to need in order to build that bigger sense of belonging that binds us together as an American people. This could actually be a moment of turnaround when it comes to trust, when it comes to the social fabric of this country, but not if we stay on the path that we're on right now. If we stay on this path, we're never going to make it.
The new book is Trust, America's Best Chance. Pete Buttigieg, always great to have you on the show. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.